welcome back to new video. And in this video I'm going to show you how you can write your own multi-module application with Jetpack Compose. So we will learn a lot of things, so I'm going to tell you one by one what are the things you will learn in this video. So first thing, you will learn how to manage your build.gradle dependencies, because it is a super important. If you don't manage your build.gradle dependencies properly, you're gonna copy paste that dependency again and again. So it is not recommended way, because in multi-module application we have a lot of modules and each module contains its own build.gradle file. So at some point we have to manage this thing at one place and gonna reuse that thing, that dependencies again and again in our build.gradle file. So we will learn how to do this efficiently. Second things, you will learn how to use clean architecture with model view model pattern. So we'll learn how to do this in multi-module application. Apart from this, at some point of your application you have to navigate from your one feature to another feature, and it is a typical thing for those who never done multi-module programming. So we'll see how to do navigation from one feature to another feature, which is as I say, it is a important thing, because without navigation your application will not never create. After this we'll see how to use Dagger-Hilt in our multi-module application, because we have to manage our dependencies properly. So we use dependency injection framework, and Dagger-Hilt is our dependency injection framework. So we learn how to use Dagger-Hilt in our multi-module application. We use Retrofit, use flow, Kotlin coroutine, and also we see how to manage our Jetpack Compose screen state management. So we learn a lot of things, and please stuck this video to the end and you will see how to do all these things in our multi-module application. Our first feature, in this feature we have a search bar where you can search your movies. So like I'm gonna type Harry. Now here you can see we saw a list of movies which is coming from our backend. Okay, so this is a feature we are going to build in our first video. So let's get started. We are going to look how to manage our build.gradle dependencies in our multi-module application. So first you need to create a new project. So for that, go to file, new project, choose empty compose activity, because we are going to use Jetpack Compose for our UI. Click on next. Here you need to fill the information of your application, like name, package name, location, what is your minimum SDK, all these stuffs. Lastly, you just simply click on this finish button and it will generate a new project for you. So I had already created a new project, so I'm not gonna create a new project again. So I simply cancel this, and this is my project. Now we need to manage our dependencies. So for managing our dependencies, just change the view of your project, Android to project mode, and here create a new directory, and directory name is build source, and within this we're gonna create a new file naming build.gradle.kts, and make sure the naming is super important, because if you spell wrong these names then it won't work basically. So first you need to write some plugins, and within this plugin write this line Kotlin DSL, and after that we have repositories. So within these repositories I use Maven Central and simply sync this thing. Now you can see everything is recognizable by our Android Studio. Here we have Kotlin DSL, repositories, and this build source is also change in a form of module. So this build source is present in our root level. That is why it is accessible from every build.gradle for each module. Now within this, just going to create a new directory, and the directory name is source main Java. Within this you need to create a new Kotlin file, and the file name is dependencies. To you, if you prefer any other kind of name you will provide, no problem at all. Dependencies. So this one is my preferable name, that is why I give the dependencies name. So within this, what I'm gonna do, I'm creating object naming version, and we have our dependencies specific objects. Like if we have a Dagger-Hilt dependency, so I provide object name Dagger-Hilt. Okay, so now I'm gonna change this view mode from project to Android and jump into our module app, and here you can see we have a lot of dependencies. So I just pick one of them and use this thing in our, and use this dependency in our here file. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a new object depths. Within this I'm gonna create a const while naming core and paste our dependency over here. So just convert this thing into a string and take out this version from here and use that version in our version object. So paste this thing, convert this into a string, and now it's time to use this version name in our depths object core dependency. Now I'm gonna use this core in our module app level. So replace this thing with depths.core. Sync your project and you will see after the completion of this sync, this thing is recognizable by our build.gradle. So wait for a moment. So here you can see our core is now recognizable by our build.gradle. So like this we have a lot of dependencies, so I'm gonna convert these dependencies in this form. But before that, within our dependency I'm gonna copy paste a few dependencies which I wanna use in this project. All these dependencies I'm gonna use in this project. There are some dependencies which I extra put in this file because I might use this file in my other projects too. So that is why I put a lot of dependencies in here. So if you are gonna use all this thing, you can use it, no problem. But still I'm pasting all of this thing in this file. Okay. Now jump into our module app level, and here I'm gonna replace all this implementation with our depths, or you can say our dependencies file libraries. So I replace everything. So now it's time to sync our project and see if we got any error or not. So now our sync is complete and you can see there will be no error. So it will say to migrate our project. So just click on this run migration and it will migrate your Kotlin code from previous version to newer version. And one more thing, go to your build.gradle root level, or you can say project level. Here you need to change the compose UI version because I'm gonna use the latest one, which is 1.4.0 alpha 05 I think. And for this compose UI version you have at least 1.8.0 Kotlin version, and if you change this thing you have to change your Kotlin compile extension version too. So change this thing from 1.2.0 to 1.4.0 and sync your project. Our Gradle build successfully sync, and here you can see the same dialog. So again run your migration. So our syncing is complete. Now we are going to create few modules for our project. So we have three type of modularization. So first one is layer wise modularization, second one is feature wise, and the third one is combine. The combining of these two is the third one. So the layer wise modularization, we have three modules: data layer, domain layer, and our UI layer. Second one is feature wise modularization, in which we have a feature, like a module is representing a feature, like we have any kind of authentication in our application. So we create a different module naming auth, and within this we have managing our authentication system. So each feature is represented by a single module. Now the third one is basically the combination of these two. So basically we have a feature like you have authentication, and within this authentication we have three layers: data, domain, UI. So the combination of these two is what we are going to use in this project. So let's get started and create some modules in order to understand how we actually use this thing and how to create that modularization in our application. So for this, go to file, new, select new module, go to Android library, and here make sure to give a module name. So the first module which I'm gonna create is feature. Okay, within this feature we have our movie feature, and within this movie feature we have data layer, domain layer, and UI layer. So first thing, I'm gonna create my data layer, and within this package name I want to change the example to feature. And what feature? Feature dot movie dot data. Okay, uncheck this and finish it. So this one is our first module, movie, and within this movie feature we have our data layer. Now we want to create two more layer, UI layer and our domain layer. So go to your feature, here we have a movie and our data layer within this. Now create our domain layer and the presentation layer. So go to module, Android library, feature, movie, and within this we have our domain layer, and replace this example with feature movie domain, uncheck this, finish it. So now I'm gonna create my UI layer. So go to your module, Android library, remove this thing with UI, and replace this example with feature movie. So feature dot movie UI, uncheck this, finish it. So we have feature naming movie, and within this we have three layer: data layer, domain layer, and UI layer. Like this, we have one more feature which is actually used to show the movie details to our user. So for this, create a new module and go to your Android library, replace this my library with movie underscore details, and replace this example with feature movie details, and within this we have our data layer actually. Alright, so uncheck this, finish it. Alright, so here you can see we have our data layer. Like this we have our domain and UI layers. So module, Android library, here we have our domain, and replace this example with feature dot movie details. Uncheck this, finish it. Like this we have our UI layer. So generate a new module for our UI. Go to Android library, remove this my library to UI, and replace this example with feature dot movie details. Uncheck this, finish it. Alright, so now we have two feature, movie and movie details, within our feature. Now it's time to create a new module for our core. So select new module, go to Android library, and here I'm gonna create core module. So within this core we have our network thing. So we have our network thing like data providers we have in this particular module, and the package name is actually not .com.example.network, it is com.core.network. Uncheck this, finish it. So it will generate a new module naming core, and within this we have our network module, not package. Right, so within this core I'm going to create one more module for our common use case, and the module name is common. Replace this example with core common, uncheck this thing, and lastly finish it. Alright, so now we have network module, common module, and we need to create one more module for naming feature API. So this is used in order to navigate from one screen to another screen. So Android library, and the name is feature underscore API. Change this example to core. Uncheck this and finish it. So we had already created all of our modules which we need in our project. Okay, so now we will move with our network module. So within our network module we have data providers which actually consume our REST API to get data from web service. So first thing I will show you the REST APIs which we will consume in this application. So this is our website, so the moviedb.org. So I'm going to consume here moviedb APIs. So we have these two APIs. Okay, so the first API is actually returning us a list of movies, and the second API is return back the movie details of a particular movie. Okay, so you need an API key in order to access these APIs. So first you register yourself, and after that click on this avatar, go to settings, and here you see API. So click on this API, generate your own API key, and after that API key you will use this REST APIs because it require API key to access these APIs. So I'm gonna copy these two APIs and come back in our project, go in our network module. So we will use Retrofit for integrating the REST API. So first thing, I wanna add dependencies in our build.gradle for core network module. So here I am gonna implement our retrofit dependencies. So retrofit, and we require two more things. The first one is OKHTTP, and the second one is JSON converter. Okay, so we use JSON converter factory to create our JSON response to model classes. Gradle have been synced. I also add Dagger-Hilt dependency and its plugin on the build.gradle network level and on the project level. Okay, and sync your project. You will now able to use Dagger-Hilt in your network module. So go back in your network module and I'm gonna create my first interface, which is API service, and this interface is actually used by Retrofit to implement the logic using which he got the response from our REST API. So the first method is HTTP get method, suspend function get movie list, and the return type is not determined yet. So in order to create a data class, go back to your response, copy the response, come back in your project and create a new package naming model. Within this model I'm gonna use this third-party plugin, copy paste my all the response and give the name to your data class which you will generate. Okay, so movie list response. So within this we got two data classes. The first one is movie list response and the second one is result. So actually this result represent our movie, so I'm gonna change the name to movie DTO. Okay, go back to your API service and now the return type is movie list response, but we don't know from where we got the response. So we have to connect this function, or you can say method, with our REST API. So we will provide the information of our REST API in this block. So go back, copy this, come back to your project, and I'm gonna paste that REST API here. So this is our base URL and rest all the thing is endpoint. So copy your endpoint, go to get, paste here, and we have two queries, API key and the query. So I'm generating two queries for them. So the first one is our API key type string, and the second one is our query, which actually a query queue in a form of string. Okay, so this is a function and the implementation is written by our Retrofit library, so we don't take care of the implementation thing. Now we had set up our Dagger-Hilt in our network module, so I'm gonna create a new package and the package name is di. Within this I'm gonna create module for our Dagger-Hilt. So I'm gonna call this network module. This is an object and we use install in and use singleton component class. This is a module, so in order to tell our Dagger this is a module, annotate this object with module. Okay, now in order to provide dependency, use provide annotation and provide. So I'm gonna provide my API service by using this function. So API service return, as I said, the implementation of API service is gonna written by our Retrofit. So we use Retrofit builder, and here we need to pass our base URL. So go back to your API service and we have our base URL from here to here. Copy this, paste here, and then we also need converter factory. So this converter factory is used to convert our JSON response to this data class. So basically it will map our JSON to these model classes. Okay, so we have to add that converter factory here. So JSON converter factory dot create. Okay, so lastly I'm gonna build my Retrofit object, and by using this Retrofit object I'm gonna write my API service implementation. Okay, now it's time to create our data providers. So I'm gonna create a new package and the package name is data providers. Within the data provider I'm gonna create a class and the class name will be movie data providers, and within this I'm gonna inject my API service, import this inject notation. Within this I'm gonna create a suspend function naming get movie list, and here I'm gonna pass my API key, which is a form of string, and our query. By using our API service I'm gonna call my get movie list, pass our API key in here and our query. Okay, now we will use this data providers in our data module. So this is all for our network module. What we had do in this network module. First we will generate our API service. Here we write a function. This function is going to be implemented by our retrofit library, so we don't take care of the implementation part. We have our model classes like movie DTO, so this will contain the movie details. This is our movie list response, which actually replicating our JSON response. And we have our Dagger-Hilt setup, so we generate a network module, and within this network module we had a provide function. So basically it will provide our API service implementation. So this API service implementation is gonna return by our retrofit. So this is all for our network module. Now we will continue with our first feature, which is movie feature. So go to your feature. We have two module, movie and movie details. Go to your movie module, and here you will see three layers: data layer, domain layer and UI layer. So the responsibility of this layer are something like this. So data layer is responsible for getting data, either it's from local database or from web service or REST API. Second one is our domain layer. So domain layer is used to write our use cases. In that we write our business logic. Okay. Third layer is our UI layer. So in UI layer we have our screens or activity or fragment. In our case we use Jetpack compose, so we have our screens in UI layer, and also we have our view model. So view model is used to write presentation logic, like if you write any kind of validation or all those things is present in your view model, and your screen is actually representing your data to the user. Okay, so this is a simple responsibility of our layers. So what I'm gonna do, I will continue with our data module. So within our data module I'm gonna create few packages. So the first package is our dependency injection. Second one is our repository implementation. Our repository package, we write the implementation of repository which is present in our domain layer. Okay, so domain layer is simply write the interface, repository interface, and we will implement that interface in our data layer. Alright, so now it's time to jump in our domain layer, and within our domain layer I'm gonna create few packages. So the first package is model. So this model is called domain layer model, and this model is actually used in our UI layer. We didn't use data transfer object in our domain layer. We use domain layer models in our domain layer, and this model is actually used in our UI layer. After this I'm gonna create one more package naming repository, so it will contain our repository interface. And lastly I think we have our use cases. Okay, so in our repository I'm gonna write my movie repository interface. So movie repository, this is an interface, and within this interface we have suspend function get movie list. It has API key and a query. Okay, the return type is very simple, list of movie. So this movie is actually a domain layer object, domain layer data class. So we will create this movie in our model. So this is a data class, and the naming of this data class is movie, and within this I'm gonna have my image URL, because my first screen is only show the image to our user. Okay, this is why I use image URL. Alright, so now go back to your movie repository, import this movie. Now we will implement this interface in our data layer. So for that, go to your repository, right click, create a new class, and the class name is movie repo implementation. Use your movie repository. This is not accessible because it present in a different module. So in order to access this movie repository, we need to connect this data layer with our domain layer. So go to your build.gradle of data layer. Okay, this one, and here I'm gonna write a simple line which is used to connect this module to our domain layer module. So we have feature, within feature we have our movie feature, and we have domain layer within this movie module. So sync now, go back to your movie repository implementation. Now you will see that this movie repository is accessible after the sync. So import this, implement its member functions. So we have get movie list. So we will use our data providers in order to take data from web service. So first I'm gonna use inject constructor private val movie data providers. This is not accessible again because network module is separate and data layer is not know about network module. So in order to tell our data layer that you use network module for this movie data providers, go your build.gradle and duplicate this. We have core, within core we have our network, and within network we have our data providers. So sync now, go back to your repository implementation, and after the sync you will see that movie data providers is available. Right. So import this. Now here I'm gonna use return keyword, movie data providers, get movie list, use your API key and query, and it is giving me an error because of the type. So required type is list of movie, but it will return the movie list response. So what I will do, I will write a mapper in order to map this with this. So go here within our data layer, not domain layer. Within our data layer I'm gonna create a package, and the package name is mapper, and within this mapper I'm gonna create a simple file, and the file name is mapper. Within this file I'm gonna create a extension function movie list response to domain movie list. Return type is list of movie. Use return keyword as result, and I'm gonna use map, generate a movie object, and within this I'm gonna pass the image poster path. Okay, so by doing this you actually convert movie list response to list of movies. Now I'm gonna use this in our movie repository implementation. So to domain movie list. Okay, now it is not giving me an error. Now go back to your, I think it will. Okay, so inject is not recognizable because of Dagger-Hilt is not configure in this module. So we need to configure the Dagger-Hilt for this module. So in order to do this, go to your build.gradle of your data layer, and here need to implement Dagger-Hilt dependencies. So Dagger-Hilt and then its compiler. So compiler is used with capt, and on the top you need to add the plugins. So in order to add plugin, we already did this thing in our network module. So go there and copy these two things, come back to your data layer, paste here, sync now, and import this inject. Okay, now it's time to write our module for Dagger-Hilt. So I'm gonna create a data layer module, install in with singleton component, annotate this thing with module because it represents a module for Dagger-Hilt, and here I'm gonna provide my repository implementation. So provide movie repo, and the return type is movie repository, return movie repository implementation. Its requirement is movie data providers. So go to your network module and check whether you provide this dependency or not. I think you will not provide this dependency, so write a provide annotation, provide data, or you can say movie data provider. Okay, so this data provider require API service, so pass this API service, and return type is movie data providers, pass API service. So this is a return type. Okay, now jump back to your data layer module, and this time use movie data providers as a argument and simply use this in our movie repository implementation. So now it is able to inject movie repository. Okay, so yeah, that's it for our data layer of movie feature. Okay, so now it's time to jump in our domain layer. So within our domain layer we have use cases, so it's time to write use cases. So the first use case is get movie list use case. Okay, within this I'm using operator function invoke, and we need to pass API key and the query. I'm gonna use flow. So the return type of flow is, so in order to manage our UI we create a sealed class. So I'm gonna create that sealed class in our common module, because this sealed class is gonna used for each feature. That is why I will create this in our common module. So the name of this file is UI event, and this is a sealed class. Make sure this is a generic class type T, and within this I'm gonna create my first UI event, which is a loading. Okay, extend this with UI event. Like this we have success and we need to pass data. Okay, this data is going to be passed with our UI event, so that is why I'm gonna make while data, which is a type of T, and its initial value is null. Second we have message, so message is type of string, and initially this thing is also null. So now it's time to use our success event. So in our success we get data from our REST API or data layer, so that data is going to be passed in our UI event. Like this we have error, and in error we receive few message. Pass those message in our UI event. Okay, so this is our simple UI event in order to manage our UI. Now in order to access this UI event, first I will go in my domain layer build.gradle, so this one, and here I need to connect implementation project and the core common. Sync now. After sync you will able to use UI event in this module. Go back to your get movie list use case, and here you see, okay, so you got the UI event and the type is list of movie. Alright, so within our flow we are gonna use movie repository. So within our use case I'm gonna inject movie repository, so movie repository, but this inject is not recognizable because we didn't set up our Dagger-Hilt for this module. So in order to set up, go to your data layer build.gradle, copy these dependencies, paste in your domain layer dependencies, and on the top you have these two plugins. Copy this plugin, paste this plugin in your domain layer and sync now. Okay, after syncing go to your get movie list use case and import this inject. Alright, so now we will use movie repository in this flow. Okay, so this flow has catch. If anything goes wrong, then this catch block will execute. So in this scenario I'm gonna emit the UI event dot error and pass the message. Okay, and I wanna run this flow on dispatcher IO. Okay, and on the top of the block I'm gonna emit our UI event dot success. I'm gonna consume my movie repository get movie list, pass our API key and the query. Okay, so this is our implementation of invoke. Before sending our success event we have to send the loading event. So loading, which is coming from UI event. So by using this event we actually show a progress bar or any kind of thing which you want to do during loading. So this is the complete implementation of our use case. Now I'm gonna create a dependency injection package for this domain module. In our dependency injection, I'm gonna create a new object, and the object name is domain layer module. Install in singleton component. Annotate this thing with module, and within this I'm gonna write a provide function which will provide our use case. So get movie list use case. Okay, so return type is get movie list use case, return get movie list use case, and this requirement is movie repository, so pass movie repository and consume movie repository in our get movie list use case. Now this movie repository is going to be provided by our data layer dependency injection module, so over here. Alright, so by doing this, I think we successfully complete our this feature, movie feature, data layer and domain layer. Now it's time to implement our UI layer. So now it's time to our UI layer implementation. But before moving with our UI layer, I think we first set up our navigation, because it's very important in multi-module project, and at the same time it is typical for those who never do navigation in multi-module projects. So I try my best to elaborate you in a very simple manner. So let's get started and see how we implement nested navigation or navigation in multi-module application. So in our core, I already created this feature API, and within this feature API, you need to create an interface, and the interface name feature API. Within this feature API, I'm gonna create a function, and the function name is register graph. Now this has two input. The first one is nav controller, which is nav host controller, and the second one is nav graph builder. Nav graph builder. Okay, so these two things is coming up from Jetpack Compose navigation library. So I'm gonna add that implementation in our feature API build.gradle. So go here, I'm gonna add the implementation Jetpack Compose navigation. Okay, I'm gonna sync this. Alright, so sync has been completed. Go to your feature API. Now it is available. So import nav host controller and import your nav graph builder. Every feature has its own navigation graph. So in multi-module projects, we follow nested navigation. So a feature represent a simple small navigation for its own feature. Like we have this movie feature. So this movie feature contain its own navigation graph. Movie details contain its own nested navigation graph, or you can say subgraph. So now I'm gonna go back in our UI layer, and within our UI layer I want to use this feature API. So first I need to add this feature API module in our UI layer. So jump in your build.gradle movie UI, and here on the top I'm gonna write few line of code in order to connect the feature API. So project colon, we have core, within core we have our feature API. Sync now. So now go back to your UI layer, and here I'm gonna create one package, and the package name is navigation. Within this navigation I'm gonna create one interface which is specific to this feature, and the name of that interface is movie API. Okay, this is an interface and it will also extend our feature API. And here if you want to create any function which you implement, you will do, but I'm not gonna create any kind of function which we implement. So after this interface you need to create one more object, and the object name is internal movie feature API. Okay, and this will use our feature API, or you can say implement feature API. And okay, so we don't have this nav controller or nav graph builder because we didn't add the dependency for that in our UI module. So go to your feature API, copy this dependency, go to your UI layer, build.gradle, paste this thing, sync now, and after the syncing you will see these two things is recognizable. So now you have your register graph. So it is the right time to register our movie feature nested navigation graph with our root. So now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna use our nav graph builder. So we have our nav graph builder which we pass from this function, and in this we have navigation. Okay, we need to pass here start destination. So pass your start destination, and the second one is route. Okay, so these two things is necessary for our nested navigation. So because it is a nested navigation, it has its own route. By using that route, we recognize that this navigation is represented our movie nested navigation. Okay, so for that let us suppose I pass movie nested navigation. Simple. Now start destination, as you know, start destination is the destination which you want to show on the first time when you jump on this navigation. So within this we have composable as usual, and suppose you want to show your movie, so route name is movie, and here if you create any kind of screen or composable screen, you will use that screen like movie screen, and the start destination is in our case it is movie. So on the first time when we navigate to this nested navigation graph, it will show us this movie screen, and this is the route of that movie screen. So it will compare if this route is present here or not with composable. So yes, it is present, so it will check. If it is equal, then it will render this screen. Okay, so using this you actually register that navigation graph in your root. So we did not finish that process right now, but we actually add this nested navigation in our root. Now it's time to go in our app module and finishing up all of the navigation setup. So in order to set up our navigation, go to your app module, and within your app module you first need to set up our Dagger-Hilt, because without using Dagger-Hilt you didn't use navigation in your project. So I'm gonna create one class naming base application. This is a class extend application, and annotate this thing with hilt android app, not recognizable because we don't set up Dagger-Hilt for our app module. So I think we already did the setup for data module. So go here, copy all these stuffs, go to build.gradle module app level file, on the plugins paste this thing, again go to your data layer, copy all of this thing, go to your module app level and simply paste all this thing. Okay, sync your project. After that it will be available hilt android app in this file. Import this. Now it's time to register this application. Go to your manifest. Within our application tag we have name, register your base application, and one more thing, I'm gonna take my internet permission because we use internet in our application. All right, now it is time to create a navigation provider. So I'm gonna create a new package naming navigation, and here I'm gonna create a data class. So that data class name is navigation provider. Okay, so within this we have our APIs. Like if we have our feature movie, within this, within our UI we have movie API. Okay, so this movie API is gonna pass in our navigation provider. Okay, so while movie API, okay, this movie API is not recognizable because it is not connected to our module. So go to build.gradle module app level, and this time add implementation project and feature movie UI. Okay, sync your project and after that you will able to recognize this movie API. Movie API here is available. Alright, now it's time to provide this movie API. Now because movie API is an interface, we need to write the implementation for this movie API. So I'm going to create a class, and the class name is movie API implementation, which implement this movie API. And within this we only have register graph, and this register graph uses our internal movie feature API. So internal movie feature API register graph, and within this you need to pass your nav controller and nav graph builder. Okay, so now we will provide this implementation using Dagger-Hilt. So we're gonna create a dependency injection package, and within this I'm gonna create a new UI module object, install in. So we did not set up our Dagger-Hilt for UI module, so I'm gonna do this. So go back to your data layer, copy all these dependencies, go back to your UI layer, add these dependencies, and from data layer on the top you have these two plugins. Copy those plugins, go to your UI layer, build.gradle, paste that plugins on the top, sync your project, and after that your installing has been available to you. Import your installing, and within this I'm gonna use singleton component class. This represent a Dagger module, so annotate this thing with Dagger module, and on the UI module write a provide function which provide our movie API. So return type is our movie API implementation. Okay, that's it. So now it will provide a movie API implementation, and that implementation is used in our app module, and by using this implementation we create this navigation provider data class. Okay, so in order to use this navigation provider, so I'm going to create a new package, and the package name is TI. Within this I'm going to create app module object, install in singleton component class, annotate this with module, and here I'm gonna write a provide function, provide navigation provider. Return type is navigation provider, and I'm gonna return a navigation provider, but it requires movie API. So pass movie API and use this movie API here. So this movie API is gonna inject by our feature movie API dependency injection over here. Okay, so from here it will generate a movie API, and our app module navigation provider will consume that movie API. We will create few constant in order to manage our route. So that constant I will create in my common module. So go to your core, and within your core you have common, and within this common I'm gonna create one package, and the package name is navigation underscore constant. Within this I'm gonna create a file, and that file name is navigation constant. I'm gonna create an object, and I'm gonna manage my constant depending on the features. So like we have our movie feature, so I'm gonna call this object name movie feature, and within this we have const val. So the first one is our nested route, so I'm gonna name this nested route, and the nested route value is movie nested route, and the first screen is our movie screen. So I'm gonna call the variable name is movie screen route, and I'm using the same name here, movie screen route. Okay, so we have only these two constant right now. In future we also have the movie detail feature object. Okay, so for now just leave this thing as it is. So within your build.gradle feature movie UI layer, I'm gonna add this line of code, implementation project, and within this we have core common sync now. and go back to your internal movie feature API. So here you see we give our start destination movie. So just replace this thing with our created constant. So movie feature, and the start destination is our movie screen route. Okay, now replace this movie nested route with our created variable. So movie feature, movie screen nested route, not movie screen route. Okay, so copy this route and paste within this composable. Alright, so now jump back in your app module, and here within navigation I'm gonna create a file which have naming app navigation. This is a file, and within this file I'm gonna create a composable naming app nav graph. Alright, so within this app nav graph I'm gonna pass my nav controller. Okay, so the dependency is not present in this build.gradle, so I'm gonna add that dependency. So go here, add implementation, and we use Jetpack compose navigation. Sync now. Go back to your app navigation, and here you will see after the syncing nav controller is available. So I'm gonna use nav host controller. Okay, and the second parameter is very important parameter, which is navigation provider. All right, and within this I'm gonna create nav host, pass your nav controller, and within this graph we use start destination, and the start destination is nothing but our movie nested navigation graph. So pass that navigation route here. So the navigation route is present in our movie API, internal movie feature API, and here you can see the nested navigation route is movie feature nested route. So copy this, go back to your app navigation and paste here, but it is not recognizable. Again, module is not connected to our common. So I'm gonna go and add this in our build.gradle module app level. So we have core, and within this core we have common. Sync now, right? So import this, and within this I'm gonna use my navigation provider. So use your navigation provider. It has movie API that contain register graph. Pass your nav controller, pass your nav graph builder. Okay, so this module is not connected to our feature API module. That is why it will give me this error. So go to your build.gradle module app level and add this feature API. So this feature API is present in our core feature API. Sync now, and you will see the error would be gone. The error will be gone after the syncing. See, the error would be gone. So now we will use our app nav graph in main activity. So first I'm gonna create a composable app. Okay, and within this I'm gonna cut this surface, paste here, and we need to pass nav controller, nav host controller in this app, and create a variable naming nav controller, which is initialized with remember nav controller. Remove this navigator, and after that you call your app, pass your nav controller in it, and within this surface I'm gonna call my app nav graph, pass your nav host controller and the navigation provider. So this navigation provider is actually provided by our Dagger-Hilt. So you need to use Android entry point, and on the top I'm gonna use field injection let init var navigation provider. Now this navigation provider is used in our app. So navigation provider, add this thing in your app. Now it's time to pass this navigation provider in our app navigation graph. That's it. Everything is, I think, complete for the navigation. More thing, I forgot to add internal before this object, because we only use this internal movie feature API within this module. That is why we put internal keyword, before the object. Okay, rest all the thing is fine. So I'm gonna rebuild this thing. If any error is occur, then we will fix that error too. Alright, so our Gradle build successfully finished. That means no error encounter during the build. So yep, we complete our navigation setup. Now it's time to move on with our UI module for movie feature. It's time to complete our UI layer. So within your package, create a new package naming screen, and I'm gonna create view model class, movie search view model. Extend this with view model, and annotate this with hilt view model because it is a view model, and we will perform constructor injection here. So private val, and we are gonna inject our use case. So get movie list use case. Okay, so it is not available because our UI module doesn't know about domain layer or domain module. So go to your build.gradle and duplicate this. I'm gonna use feature movie module, and within this movie module we have domain layer. So use our domain and sync it. Now after the syncing, you will see get movie list use case is available here. So let me import this. Get movie list use case, now it is available. Alright, after that we will create a data class which actually act as a state holder for our Jetpack compose screen. So within this screen I'm gonna create that data class. So name would be movie search state holder. We have first variable naming is loading, type boolean, initial value false. Second is our actual data. In my case it is a list of movie. Make sure you import the right one and initialize it with null. The last one is our error message. So if any kind of error occur, though we will receive message from our use case, and that message is gonna store in this data class error variable. Okay, jump back to your movie search view model, and I'm gonna create a private val movie list variable which is a mutable state of our state holder type. So movie search state holder. Okay, now we will create a variable naming movie list which is a type of state, and the type would be same movie search state holder. Initialize this with underscore movie list. Import this state. Alright, so I'm going to create one more variable which is actually used to store our query, which user type. So underscore query, which is a type of mutable state flow, and the type would be string. Initialize with mutable state flow empty string. Create a variable naming query, and this time it is a type of state, not state flow, and here the type would be same string, and initialize this with upper query. Alright, so now we have two variables. The first one is actually contain the state holder, second one is contain our query. Now I'm gonna create a function get movie list, and within this we pass our API key which is a type of string, and second is our actual query. We use view model scope to launch the coroutine, and here we will use our use case. So get movie list use case, and within this we pass our API key and the query, and we use on each. So on each is basically trigger every time when anything is emitted from our get movie list use case. Now I'm gonna launch this thing in our view model scope. So within our on each, you see we got a UI event. So I'm gonna use when expression pass our it, and I'm gonna check its type. So suppose the type is loading, and we have two more states like we got error or we got success. So in loading case, we are gonna use our movie list value and update that value with a new movie search state holder, and this time the is loading value would be true, not false. Now copy this, paste in your error case, and for error case the error message would be new one. So error it dot message. So this message is coming up from our use case. Alright, so just like this, go to your success event, and here this time we will pass the data. So it dot data. So this is a completion of our get movie list. So basically we trigger our use case, and on each emission we run this piece of code. It will check our event. If the loading event, it will simply update our movie list value with the new state holder, and if it is a case of loading, then is loading is true. If it is a case of error, we will get error message. If it is a case of success, we will get our actual data. So after that, I'm going to create one more function naming set query, and within this we pass string, and we are going to update our query. So query dot value is s. Okay, so I'm gonna use init block, and within this init block I'm using vModel scope launch. Basically we launch a coroutine, and I'm gonna use my query dot debounce. So basically debounce is used to produce a delay. Suppose your user type ABC instantly, then we don't wanna make 3 API call. Instead we wait for some time. If user doesn't type for 1 second, then we trigger our API. So for that case I want to use my debounce. Okay, and after that we collect the latest changes, or you can say latest value of underscore query, and we will call our get movie list and pass our API key. So API key is not there, pass your query. So I'm gonna create a simple variable naming API key. So you will use your API and I'm gonna use my API. Okay, so that's it. Everything is finished from our vModel side. Now I'm gonna create one more file for our composable. So I'm gonna call this thing movie screen. This is a file, and here I'm gonna create a composable naming movie screen. The input or the parameter would be our vModel, movie search vModel. So first thing, I'm gonna create a variable naming result and use our vModel movie list value. So basically our result is now containing the value of movie list, and the second one is our query. So vModel dot query dot. So we are going to collect this in a form of state, because if our query will change, we want that our composable is recomposed, because we need to update our text field. That is why. All right, so we don't have the compose dependencies in our build.gradle. So in order to add all the dependencies which we need for compose, what I am doing, simply create a new activity. Now this is a trick. You will use this trick, or you will use whatever you know. So go to your gallery, empty compose activity, next finish this. So it will automatically add all the required dependency for Jetpack compose which we want. Alright, so go to your build.gradle movie UI layer. So here you can see it add a lot of dependencies. So what I'm gonna do, go my module app level build.gradle and copy this all stuff, come back and paste that stuff here, because it exactly the same. Remove this thing because it already present on the top. Let's sync your project again and come back in our movie screen. So I'm gonna use scaffold here. So within our scaffold we have top bar. So in the top bar we will use text field. So it require value and a on value change. So in order to use value, I'm using my query value, and within our on value change I'm gonna use my vModel dot set query and pass the string. Okay, and within our scaffold scope I'm gonna use logd, because this error is coming up because we didn't use this padding value. So I'm gonna log at this padding values, error would be gone. It's time to manage our all three state, like loading state, error state and the success state. So first I'm gonna use my result dot is loading. If it is true, Then I'm gonna create a box modifier, fill max size, and my content alignment is on the center. It will contain a circular progress indicator. Similarly, like this, we have a result.error. If it is not blank, that means something is, the initial value error is empty string. But if it is not empty, that means error will be there during the execution of our REST API or use cases. So I'm going to create a box, and this box is taking all of our space. Content alignment is on the center, and lastly we have our text. Now this text is actually show me the error message, so I'm gonna use result.error. That's it, this is our error message. Now import our text. So now it's time to manage our success state. So in order to check whether our state is success or not, I'm gonna use my result data and check if it is not null, because initially it was null. If it is not null, that means something is initialized. So I'm gonna check first thing, if our list is empty. So we don't have list, we have it. If it is empty, that means empty list coming back from our web service. So I'm gonna use box modifier, fill max size, and my content alignment would be on the center, and again I'm gonna use text and simply show that nothing found. Okay, and if it is not the case, then we are going to use something which is called lazy vertical grid. So use lazy vertical grid. So it require column. So in order to initialize this, I'm gonna use grid cells dot adaptive, and we pass our minimum size, which is 128 dp. Now import this, and within our content, it's just like a lazy column content. We have items, and within this you need to pass your list which you wanna render on our lazy vertical grid. So I want to render my result.data, basically list of movies. So pass your list of movies here, import this. Now you will see it will give me movie. Basically in this trailing lambda, it will give one by one movie, and we are going to render that movie. So I'm gonna create my list item. So we have a box, and this box has a modifier, and within this modifier I'm gonna give height 200 dp, and lastly I'm gonna provide border. So the border width is 1 dp, and I'm gonna provide color of white. Okay, now within this I'm gonna use async image. So async image is something which is coming up from coil library. So go to your build.gradle, and here I'm gonna add that dependency. So implementation coil image library, coil image loading library, and use coil. So now it's time to use our async image. So in model you need to pass the URL. So my URL is coming from it.image URL, and my content description is null, and I'm gonna use content scale which is fit. Alright, so this is our simple list item. Now come back in our scaffold top bar, and within this we have our text field. Now I'm gonna change the behavior of text field. So for that I'm gonna use something which is called colors, and within this we have text field default. So because I'm using text field, so I'm gonna choose text field color, and within this we have a lot of parameters where we passed our color. So I'm gonna use disable indicator color as a transparent, and I'm gonna use my focused indicator color is also color dot transparent. Alright, and lastly I'm gonna use placeholder. So my placeholder is simply say search movie. Okay, and we have trailing icon. So this trailing icon is basically show me the search icon. So image, in our image vector I'm gonna use icons default search, and the content description again null. Okay, so this is our text field. So this text field has a a finite width, but I want that text field is gonna take whole of the width. So in order to provide the whole width, I'm gonna use modifier fill max width. All right, that's it. So now it's time to use this movie screen in our internal movie feature API. So go in our internal movie feature API, and here I'm gonna use our movie screen. It requires view model, so we are gonna initialize this view model. So val view model, use hilt view model. Okay, so we don't have the dependency. Go to your build.gradle UI package, and here use that implementation Dagger-Hilt dot, and you will see this hilt compose navigation. So simply sync now, import this and simply pass this view model here. Okay, so we need to pass the type. So the type would be movie search view model. All right, so now go back to your build.gradle, and here everything is fine. All right, so now it's time to execute our application and see whether it is running or not. So we got an error. The error would be the version 1.2.0 of a compose compiler require 1.7.0. So basically this Kotlin compiler extension version is 1.2.0, but we use compose UI version 1.4.0 alpha 05. So in order to use that UI version, you have to change this Kotlin compiler extension version from 1.2.0 to 1.4.0. And I found few more issues. The main issue is present in our core network and within our data providers. We have our API service .get movie list, and this is the place where I make mistake, a silly mistake. So in order to fix this, go to your dependency injection network module, and here you will see this 3 is also present here. And in our API service, I also add this 3 in here, and this is our actual URL. So you will see this 3 is 2 times. So what we will do, go back in our network module and remove this 3 from here. Okay, now it will work. We will do one more thing in our app module, because we will use Dagger-Hilt in our data layer and domain layer of a movie feature. So this module must be connected to our app module, otherwise our Dagger-Hilt dependency will not resolved. So in our module app level, I'm gonna add these 2 layer. So movie domain and the movie data. Now sync your project and run this application again. So our app executed successfully. In the first time, because our query is empty, it will return us empty list. So it is fine. Now when I type Harry in our emulator, let us see what will be the response. Okay, so it will return something, but we saw nothing. This is because our image URL is only contain the poster path. It doesn't contain the exactly image URL. So we need to modify a little bit in our mapper class. So go to your mapper, which is present in our data layer. So within this mapper, we have this it poster path. Only we have poster path. We don't have the full URL. So we have to convert this poster path into full URL. I'm gonna create a function naming make full URL, send our path into it, and here this is our actual URL, and at the end I'm gonna utilize my path. So I'm gonna use this make full URL here. Now it will return me the full URL, or you can say full image URL. Now I'm gonna execute my application again and see whether it is working or not. Alright, so our app execute, and when I type Harry, let us see the response. Alright, so we successfully got the response from our backend. Okay, so this is the first feature which we implemented successfully.